It's my absolute pleasure to introduce to the stage the Receipts and Spotify. Put your hands together.
Hi guys, thank you so much for coming to join us. We're going to have a really great interview with these wonderful, amazing ladies. Just so you know who we are, this is Charmaine. Go ahead and tell them about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name's Charmaine Dowdy. I'm a customer success manager in ad sales at Spotify.
And I'm Esther Opoku-Jenny. I am an associate manager working in creative intelligence, also at Spotify. But you're not here for us. You're here for these wonderful ladies. Tolly is the co-host of the Receipts podcast, as well as a writer, presenter, and co-author of Sunday Times bestseller, Keep the Receipts. As well as this, Tolly created Story, a platform dedicated to storytelling, stories about love, relationships, and everything in between. As you know, she's quick-witted, honest, and a trusted, important voice that resonates with a huge fan base of millennial women, especially black women.
Give up for Tolly, guys. Give up for Tolly. And also joined by her co-host, as well as being one half of the Receipts podcast, Audrey has established herself as a journalist, radio producer, influencer, and has hosted the Amazon Prime series, Talk That Talk. She's the co-author of the Sunday Times bestseller, Keep the Receipts, and most importantly, is a hilarious, inspiring, and fundamental trailblazer for millennial women across the globe.
Give it up!
Give it up!
Well, welcome, ladies. We're so pleased to have you here. Let's go right to the beginning.
Okay.
How did the Receipts podcast start? Where did the idea come from?
How did the Receipts podcast start? Thanks to Twitter.
Yes.
Thanks to Twitter. I'm a huge podcast fan. Like, I listen to podcasts. I love the whole thing, and I listen to loads. And one day I was like, I would really like to start one, but I didn't want to do ones with my friends. So I tweeted it. I was like, I've got the name. I just need the girls. I want to start a podcast. And a bunch of girls replied, Audrey included, and a bunch of other girls as well. And from there, I got everyone's emails. So emailed everyone, then got everyone's numbers, started a WhatsApp group, and then we met one evening, after work, to just chat and see how it would go. And the rest is history, I guess.
Did you audition people in a way?
No, it really wasn't that. It was just all of us talking and just kind of who actually wanted to do it. Because initially, the tweet did quite well, so there was loads of people replying. So it's actually, I'm being serious. I'm not just talking for talking's sake here. So it was actually to see who actually wanted to do it and just if we got on with each other, and we did, yeah.
Amazing. Guys, so you heard it here first. Tweet that tweet, shoot that shot, do what you need to do. So following on from that, we want to know, how did the Receipts podcast grow since that tweet?
Oh my God, how did it grow? So we are going to be 8 years, October the 25th is the first time we put an episode out 8 years ago. So how many years is 8 years ago now?
Quick maths.
2016, I don't know. A long time ago.
We're talkers, not maths. So how has it grown? I mean, we're here. The podcast has grown massively, and I think within the first 2 years, it was the first podcast hosted by women of color that reached #1 on Apple. That we were the first people to do that. We are now signed to Spotify. We it. Do you know what? There has been so many things that we've done that I feel like I've almost forgotten about them, and not in the way of that it didn't mean anything to me, but just in the way that I can't believe our luck. We recorded yesterday, and I was saying, sometimes I feel like I'm in a moment, it's just this is just a moment, it's a one-hit wonder, but it's a moment that's been going on for 8 years. That's not a moment, that's a career. So that's worth thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of growth, I think when we first launched, I can't speak for Tolly, but I wasn't sure whether it was going to be just something that stayed in the Twitter space. So I think for me, I always see the growth when we do our live shows and we see how diverse our audience is. We're black women and we're very unapologetic about speaking directly to our audience. But the fact that it resonates with people from all walks of life is crazy. I remember when we did our show at the South Bank, which we sold out, we had old white women there. It was so weird. There was an old white woman in her 60s there with the book, that had come to see us. And it's just crazy to see how our audience is just far and wide. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's how I always see the growth, just by the diversity of the audience as well.
Selling out at the South Bank is a flex.
Yeah.
That is definitely a flex.
There's been a few sellouts: Hackney Empire, South Bank, Palladium.
The Palladium.
Yeah,
Even Tropicana in Tottenham Court Road.
That bar in Shoreditch, we did our first live show.
I mean, how do you feel about being a prominent voice, like a prominent black female voice in the UK, especially considering how sometimes black women especially are represented in the UK? Like, how does that feel? Does that feel like a massive weight and responsibility?
Do you know what? Like, in the words of our good brother that ran that race, I never expected it, but the good Lord gave it to me. Like, literally, like I love it. Like, it's like a badge of honor for me. It's something that I wear with pride. But I can't sit here and say that it was a position that like I asked for or I thought would happen. But it's here, and like I said, wear it with honor, wear it with pride, and it's definitely something that keeps me on my toes as well. Like, you know, I'm very transparent on the podcast, but at the same time, I try to be wary of the things that I do say, because we know that we do have an audience, and like an audience that is getting younger and younger as well. So I think with that, like, you know, it comes like heavy is the head that wears the crown, or whatever the saying is. Do you know what I mean? In the least like diabolical way possible. But yeah, I just think it's just, yeah, it's a title that I wear with honor. Yeah.
And I think it's most exciting because it's something that we do whilst being ourselves. Like as in, like there is no version of us where it's just like, oh, it's because we are saying what we assume people want to say, where we've got to do this whilst actually being ourselves. And I think that's the most exciting thing about it. Like, oh, like I wear lights because of who we are, not because we are like pretending.
Definitely. And speaking of, in terms of, you know, the different audiences you have, the demographics, how have you grown internationally? I know being, you know, a fan of the podcast myself, you know, we hear listener stories from across the pond, all over. So talk to us about how it's grown internationally and what are your plans for the future?
I mean, the most exciting bits, like we're big in Nigeria and Ghana, which is a big deal for us because I'm Nigerian and she's Ghanaian. So that was like, so Spotify do a Wrapped every end of year. And honestly, they didn't actually ask me to mention them, so that was actually organic. But they do a Wrapped at the end of every year, so then you get to see where your fans are from. And it literally went like the UK, I think it was the UK, America, Nigeria, Ghana. Yeah. So it's like, and obviously there was places that we haven't even thought about entering. There were countries we can't even pronounce that were on the list that people listen to us, and people like, you know, taking the podcast on there. So the growth of it internationally has been insane. We've been on holiday and someone's been like, oh, hi, I listened to the podcast. So it's not, again, we didn't expect it, but I think it's a thing of we are just telling stories that like everybody can relate to, sort of thing. They either been through it, know someone that's been through it, or they think it's hilarious. So there's also that as well.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
I mean, we've spoken a lot about like the successes, and you've had many. But I wonder as well, what have been some of the challenges that you've had to deal with in your position?
Oh God, I think early doors being skin. I think like
we didn't have
any money. Like when we first started the podcast, I mean, I know we see it now and it's grown so much, but I think if people that have been with us from the beginning will know like the grinds that we put in. Like when we first started, we had no money. Everybody was working like full-time jobs, and we were pumping into it. Like we were investing in it. And so when we started making money back through live shows before Spotify was even a thing, we didn't really know how to manage that as well. So we would do a live show and we would just split the money and everyone would just go about their business. So
we didn't put any money in the business.
We didn't put any money in the business. Like we had no business acumen. So we'd get like a couple of grand each and we'd all go blow it, and there was nothing about reinvesting back into the business. So I would say that was probably one of our early challenges, like how to actually make it an actual functioning business. And I just remember, I think it was like maybe a third or fourth live show, and then Tolly was like, I found us an accountant, guys. Like we actually, like we need to get serious. And we were like, oh, but we don't get to keep our check kind of thing. But actually we needed to do that because one of the most important things is reinvesting back in yourself. Do you know what I mean? So I think, yeah, money was tricky at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely money. And also, like, the very obvious thing of we started with 4 people. When this thing started 8 years ago, it was 4 of us that started it, and there's now just the 2 of us. So the dynamics of the group has changed. And I think even presenting that change to audiences, right? I think many businesses get to change, and it's indoors. Nobody gets to know about it. Our Yash was outside. And it was outside, it was judged, it was talked about. So there is that aspect of, like, I think one of the things I found the hardest of the whole thing is being visible. Yeah. So when we first started, our artwork, our faces were not on it. It was just like some words. We kind of thought we'd get away with people not knowing who we were. We were like, we'll just talk and no one will know us, sort of thing. And like the only thing we had is that we had a little barcode, and that the barcode had all of our date of births. And that was just something we did for ourselves, but nobody and then the bigger it grew, it was like, oh no, people want to see you. And now, especially with podcasting, is now visual. People want to see you whilst you're talking. So I think the visual aspect of it is now like, it's you. Like the podcast, it's you. The brand is you, sort of thing. So I think being visible is something I found a little bit difficult with it.
How do you combat that, or how do you deal with that, especially in a context where everybody has an opinion, has an idea of how events went and has their own interpretation? How do you kind of stay soft and yourself in that kind of environment?
I think like we're always really big on like we've got friends at home.
Yeah.
like there's love at home. I always preach this idea that there's love at home, and we know what's true and what's happened. So I think there is comfort in that. I say this all the time, and it's just like, you lot are not my God. like it's such a thing to be like, there's actually not much you can do to me, really, sort of thing. Like you're not my God. So that's mostly my attitude with life. Yeah.
I take comfort from like knowing the real supporters versus the fake ones. Like you can see, like we're very aware of like who's genuinely like supporting us, who's behind us. Like, and I always say it, like we see it all. Do you know what I mean? It's like we might not comment on it, everything, and that's like something that's really big to us as well. Just to not engage with everything that's negative and just try to engage with the positive more. So that's how I handle it. I just try not to pay attention to the negative, which isn't very much for the most part. Yeah.
And we've spoken about, dealing with visibility, paying attention to the positive and not the negative. What would you say for people that want to enter, black creators that want to enter the podcast space in 2024? What advice would you give them?
I think it's a thing of like, what advice would I give them? Do you know what? One of my biggest advices and it's kind of something I wish I knew a lot earlier, is to immerse yourself in the podcasting industry. I think it's one of those things where it's like, I think musicians probably have this thing as well. People always assume like, yeah, I can do that. Like I can talk, I can sing, I can do that. But like, I think there's been something and I've seen it in how much it's grown the podcast, in knowing what's happening in the industry. It was me seeing that someone had got a job with Spotify UK on podcasting. That was like, oh, that means Spotify is now willing to spend money in the UK on podcasting. And then I DM'd her. I'm like, hey, I do this podcast. Do you want to meet for coffee? Which then opened to the deal that we're in today. So I think there is something in really like immersing yourself in what's happening in the industry. What did Call Her Daddy's deal just get? What did this person's deal just get? Just figure out what is going on, and then you can place yourself into what makes sense. I think it's because for the longest time, podcasting, until today, it doesn't have any gatekeepers. Anybody can do it. And people assume that it's not a fully formed industry. It is. And that's why so many black content creators are not earning the much money that other people can, because they're not immersing themselves in the industry. They're not talking to the right people. They're not finding out what the news is. Like, getting the newsletters, see what's happening, see who's got a job where, what platform is doing what. And once you do that, you give yourself a higher step up. Take it seriously. It's not just chatting on a mic. It's an industry now. This is what I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I think that also just really identify like what exactly it is you want to talk about. We had Grace Beverly on our podcast not long ago, and she said something that really resonated with me, and she was talking about business. And I think this very much applies to podcasting as well. And she said, is there a gap in the market, but is there also a market in the gap? And I think that that's also something really important to like take note of. Like, I know sometimes it feels like the market is saturated, but identify what your USP is. Like, what are you going to bring to that space? Because everyone might be doing it, but everyone's not you. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like sometimes that can be a bit of like a blind spot that people have, because I think people do assume that it's quite straightforward, and that also success isn't going to happen overnight. I think, for us, we've been doing this 8 years. That's nearly a decade. Like, it's not a small amount of time. So you might not get the views, the likes straight away, but if you're really passionate about it, and I think that falls in line with if you're doing something and talking about something that you're genuinely passionate about, you won't necessarily pay attention to that stuff yet, because you're doing it because you truly love it and not because it's something that's like popping at the moment. So yeah, so if you're passionate about what you speak about, if you identify like where your space is and what your audience is and like really like think about it, then I don't see why you can't have like a successful podcast.
Amazing. And in those 8 years, you've had some amazing guests on your program. Most recently, you had Louis Theroux.
We did.
Yeah. And I wondered, are there any other guests that you would absolutely love to have on your show?
Oh, who else would you like to have? So Louis Theroux was a dream guest for me. In fact, it didn't actually feel possible. So that was amazing. We have so many dreams of people that it feels almost ridiculous to say out loud, but hey, it's not undoable.
Yeah, it's not.
And then we have the like, Beyonce. The truth is, I really want Gemma Collins to come on. Yeah. So there's also that.
Everyone
so there's
at the
like,
GC.
it's just people. The dream guests are always people who can have a good chat. Because I think that's the thing. I think sometimes, we've got in a really good space now that people use the platform to promote things. You would be surprised the names we said no to. Like, sometimes we say no, we're like, who do we think we are? Like, but it's because they ask, we go look at them and we're like, they don't talk. Like, they're not engaging. There's actually no point. So it's whoever we actually see talking, it's like, this person is a good talker or they've got things to say. So, yeah, the GC.
Yeah, the GC, definitely. I think we both love Issa Rae would be like a dream guest.
Dream, yes.
Who else is there? I always get stuck on this question because... Oh, Nene Leakes. Like, we were trying to make it happen while she was in town, guys, and it didn't happen. She wasn't here for long enough. But any of the big housewives, like a Portia Williams, Nene Leakes, like, yeah, for me, that's, that was the dream.
I mean, you don't have to mention any names at all, but have you ever had any difficult interviews where you've like, I don't know how to navigate this guest?
City Girls.
City Girls. You said don't mention names, but we will. City Girls were awful.
Listen, that was the worst day of my life. Like, Tolly's forgiven JT. Me, I'm still not 100%
Audrey's like, I would
sure.
never listen to you.
I'm very much traumatized.
I was going to start singing the lyrics.
Like, it was awful. Like, it was awful. And the ironic thing is that their people reached out to us, and we were gassed because usually when it's that way round, you think you're going to have a good time, but they just didn't want to chat to us. It was just very awkward. We ended up going into interview style, and then it was a hot mess. That was the worst experience ever.
It was bad. Thankfully, it was on Zoom. So because it was on Zoom, I just kind of froze on purpose and ended the chat.
I was like, look at God. I was like,
And she was like, oh my God. And I was just like, no, it was me. I ended it. I couldn't do it anymore. And then I just emailed the PR like, I'm so sorry. Internet's really awful here. Like, tell the girls, God bless.
And the thing is, we didn't put that out. Like, we could have carried on and put it out for the clout, but we're so passionate about our listeners. We're like, no, you guys deserve the best content, and it doesn't matter how big the name is. If it's trash, and it had to be binned, unfortunately.
Yeah. Wow.
They didn't want to be there at all. Oh my God.
So outside of freezing Zoom, outside of locking off, what would you say are the skill sets you need to navigate these spaces? For example, when it comes to difficult interviews, or just skill sets you need in general to be personable with people?
I think we always say that it's not an interview. That's a big thing for us. Like, when we have guests on, we're like, we don't want you to do an interview with us. We just want you to join in the conversation. Like, obviously, whatever you're promoting, we'll mention it at some point, but it's not an interview. And also, we're really big on, we're not trying to catch people out. I think many people go on podcasts really shook that they're going to clip something that's going to get them cancelled, they're going to get too comfortable. We're never trying to catch people out at all. We're not salacious in that way anyway at all. So it's just like, we're not trying to catch you out. And also, we'll always try, when they come in, have a little chat, like a little pre-game, we'll chat about things. And I think because we're so open, people then get very open with us. Because sometimes the PR will be like, they're not going to talk about this, they're not going to talk about this, they're not going to talk about this. And 45 minutes in, the guest is telling us all about it without actually anybody else's approval. We had it when we had Winston Duke on.
Yeah, and Coco Jones.
And they were like, don't mention his mother, don't mention his past relationships. He's spilt the tea. We were just like, well, this is great. We just sat there talking. So I think when you're open to people then feel the need to be open with you as well, because they feel safe there.
Yeah, and I think all of that stuff starts before the cameras start. But before it's even initiated, we were talking about it earlier, if we don't think it's going to be good, they're just probably not going to come on anyway.
Yeah.
So I feel like all of that stuff starts early on. Like, you can kind of gauge how people are going to be. So yeah, and we're just really big on the conversations just being as organic as possible.
And we're honest, right? We had someone ask to come on recently, and me and Audrey, to be completely frank, we have spoke badly of this person on the podcast.
Yeah.
We were like, they can come on, but just to let them know, we have talked crap about them, and we might bring it up whilst they're there. The person, thankfully, declined.
You know what? No, at first
they said
he was gonna still come on.
Then he was like, he'll still do it.
Yeah, cool.
And then he decided no.
Yeah, then it just didn't work out.
So it didn't work out.
With your openness and your transparency, that's so often what's connected you to your listeners. But do you ever regret sometimes being too open? Do you ever feel like, oh, I wish I hadn't shared that. I wish that wasn't as available to the public as it is?
Oh, maybe sometimes.
Do you know what? Sometimes I get that feeling before an episode's gone out. But then it's very much depends on the reception for me. So if no one's picked up on it or there's no backlash, and I'm like, oh, whatever, and I just quickly move on. So, okay, I don't know if you guys listened, but the last week when we were talking about interracial like couples back in the day. Did anyone hear that episode? And I was nervous about that. I was like, oh my God, like maybe we went too far with like the down south accents and stuff like that. But then the reception was really good and I was like, oh, okay, I feel great. So for me, it's beforehand, but not really after.
Yeah, we had a general rule where we never share tea that was hot. So if we're talking about anything personal, it's like because we're over it. But sometimes you're not over it and you cuss and someone has replied to me like, hey, was this about me?
Yeah.
And he said, someone can't do podcast again. And then you switch it up on them and be like, I was just joking. So then it's fine.
Okay, guys, we have one last question for you. What is one word of advice you give? If you want people here to leave with anything, what would you say to them?
Be audacious about it, man. I think for the longest time, so many people are quite quiet, shy about what they do. Be audacious about it. Like, do it with your biggest chest. Like, if you're going to do it, just fully do it and, like, fully be in it. Like, I think this podcast started when I was 27. I'm 35 now. And I remember on my 27th year is when I learnt the word audacious, to be honest. and I remember thinking it was a great word and thinking, yes, that wasn't my thing for that year. I want to be more audacious. And that's the year this podcast started. And ever since then, I've really been big and bad, chest out about what the things that I do. And it's benefited me.
Yeah, definitely. I think to just definitely be consistent. Like, I've seen so many podcasts come and go, and I'm convinced it's not even because they're not good podcasts, but I'm convinced it's because people don't get the reaction that they want straight away. Like, obviously, we live in like a society that's very much deemed upon like numbers and views and stuff like that, and I get that that can be disheartening if you think that your platform isn't doing the numbers it should, but I promise you it's resonating with someone somewhere. And I always share this story about, there was this radio station, it's like a local London radio station, and when I was in my 9 to 5, they used to do like a talk show every Tuesday, and I used to get so gassed because it used to get me through my work afternoon, but they were so inconsistent, and you just never knew whether they were going to be there or whether they weren't going to be there. And I remember one Tuesday, I was just like, you know what, I don't even want to know whether you're there anymore, because you're so inconsistent, and I don't want to like get my hopes up and it's not there. So I say all of that to say that your audience really respect and like love consistency, and so just keep on going and just find what works for you. You don't have to do a weekly podcast if the time constraints don't work. If it needs to be monthly, let it be monthly. If it needs to be bi-weekly, let it be bi-weekly. Let do what works for you.
Solid advice there. But I wonder, thank you so much, ladies. This has been wonderful. I wonder if there are any questions from the audience. Do we have somebody down that can get a mic? Because I don't know how to jump into the crowd.
They're getting mics.
Are we getting mics?
Oh, there's someone at the front here.
Yeah. We've got a
There's
question
someone
at
there
the front.
as well. You can shout if you want.
Oh yeah, maybe you could try shouting.
Loud it.
We can hear you, but it's a tech fest. Let's be for real. Let's get you a mic. Do you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be shouting. It's coming. There we are. Thank you.
So we've got a roaming mic coming.
We have one there.
Thank you. That was an amazing conversation. I just wanted to pick up on a point that Audrey made around, was it finding the market within a niche? Like, do you have any tips around tools or research techniques to really size up what the market is for the niche that you decide on?
Do you know what? For me, I still think that, because I assume that everyone has a platform now, we all have socials. Like, I think that there's things that you can do within your sort of micro platforms that you already have. Like, when the receipt started, it very much, like, we had no marketing, we had none of that. It was very much word of mouth. I think that still works. I feel like talking to people still works. Doing polls and stuff on the socials that you have, like asking people like what they want. I feel like those kind of old school methods are still very much like relevant, and they can still help you in that way. So that's what I would start off by doing, just using the platform that you've already established and speaking within those sort of like groups that you already have and seeing what they think and what they want.
Great. I think we've got someone over here.
I've got a question. Oh my gosh, I love you guys so much. Your podcast is incredible. And that one last week, I was cracking up. Interracial couples, I was dying. My question for you is, the receipts has come so far, but where are you going to take it next? What's on the horizon for you?
World domination.
World domination. I think, do you know what? As big as the podcast has done, there's not many people who still haven't heard about it. So the growth of the podcast that was a big thing for us this year. Like the growth of it and the maturity of it, like the content of it was very important to us this year. So bigger audiences. I mean, we've been in and out of talks about television shows, what that looks like and things like that. So I think it's to kind of go cross-platform. Like the podcast to Netflix TV show pipeline is strong. There's another one, Sweet Bobby, coming out soon, and I want a piece of that spice. It's my truth.
Yeah, no, same. I definitely think growth as well, like just becoming household names. I think that would be awesome. Like, obviously, we're so grateful for the audience that we have, but as Tolly said, there's a whole world and a whole market that we haven't tapped into. I think we've both said that we want to go and do things back home as well in Ghana, Nigeria. Like, we want to do like more international live shows and just like, just do everything like that we've done on a bigger scale, basically.
And also community was big for us this year as well. What does it look like to have a community? And that's what I would actually advise everybody. This build a community. It's such a strong force and it really pushes whatever you do so far forward.
Hi ladies, over here, down here. Oh, right. I followed your journey from the start, so it's amazing to see how far you guys have come.
Thank you.
You guys are doing extremely well, and literally when I saw you guys walk on stage, I was like, yes, the girls are here. And I didn't know you were going to be here, so it's a pleasant surprise. I guess being that we are at a tech festival and AI is, I guess the popular word in tech currently, do you feel that AI may infiltrate the podcasting space? I know there's been lots of talk in voiceover about how someone can just, pretend to be you and talk about topics that you guys talk about. Do you worry about AI as a threat or challenge in your space?
I think the worry was, we spoke about this before, that we've been talking for 8 years. There's enough words that we've both said out loud that you can create any sentence you want out of our mouths at this point. If AI were to go that way, it's very, very possible. But also we were talking earlier about, I think what people concentrate on at the moment is the negative of AI. For example, we've seen the benefit of it now that like when you watch us, the transcribed, it's transcribed in AI. You get podcasters now where AI has made it so that they are speaking certain languages and it looks on point, like everything makes sense. So I think although there is scope to be like fearful of what this thing can do, but I think there's been history showing us that new technology has always scared people. People thought television was going to get rid of the radio, thing was going to get rid of this, podcasting was going to get rid of this, and these things are it's just not going to happen. It can only enhance it even more. So I don't think I'm fearful of it. I'm kind of excited to see what it can actually do and how much it can grow our world and our audiences. And also, that's my family, and she did not tell me she was going to ask that question. So how did you know I would have an answer?
No, I'm not nervous about it. Yeah, for the same things that Tolly said, I'm not nervous about it at all. I feel like at the end of the day, no matter how much technology advances, there's nothing like the human experience. Like, an AI can try me if they want to, but they haven't lived or walked in the boots that I've walked in. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think it can ever replicate like real lived human experiences. So I feel like essentially that's what audiences want. I mean, maybe there will be a world in which people want to listen to stories from AI, but I don't see that happening in the near future. So it's not something that really scares me at the moment anyway. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Tiwa, I'm a journalist. And being such, we often think about the marketing of our own shows. And as a fan of the Receipts, I watched with great interest your sort of rebrand not long ago. It seemed very well orchestrated and very intentional. So I wonder if you could just bring us into that process a bit about how you revamped the show and made it what it is today so successfully.
So I didn't hear you fully.
How you rebranded, basically.
Rebranded. Okay, so it got to a point, so we were in this position, there was 3 of us, now there was 2 of us, and it kind of had to have an overhaul revamp. And it was like, we could have easily just carried on as we were, be in the same space as we were. But it was really important that it's the same show, but a new show. For the longest time, I used to hate the saying new and improved. I was like, how can it be new and improved if it's new? It's always confused me, but I think that's exactly what it was that we did. Okay, cool. This is the same show, but it's going to be new and improved. They're going to change the setting of it. And I think it was kind of like, because sometimes when you start something a while ago, you carry on with what you're doing and you don't see what the world is doing out there anymore. Podcasting has moved on so far from when we first started it. What is it that everybody else is doing? What makes sense now? We were really wary about going into visuals, and it was like, we should be visuals. And also, this visuals should be attractive. It should look like somewhere someone wants to chill. Is it like I mean, every podcaster now has a white sofa that's a bit crushed because, hey, it looks comfortable. And I completely get it. We have the same thing as well. So it's just like, what does this look like visually? What does this look like in a conversation? And are we comfortable in this space now as well? Does it reflect who we are as a brand and what the podcast is? So I think it's really important that we've learned that outside of that studio, we carry the receipts everywhere we go. Does this setup reflect the pictures we're posting on Instagram? Does this setup reflect how we hold ourselves in public? So it was really important to know that because it's so personal, it has to match exactly who we are in the real life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with the rebrand, it's definitely something that we had like conversations about, but then we were kind of like given no choice. So when everything went down, it was the perfect opportunity for us to just come back. Like, we had some time off. In that time off, we really thought about what things wanted to look like, what was the messaging that we wanted to give out, how did we want to show elevation, like literally visually see the elevation whilst reflecting like the actual change that had happened. So yeah, I think it was like a beautiful accident in a weird way. But in terms of marketing, what we did before, like nothing was ever really intentional. It just kind of happened. But this time round, when Tolly and I decided we were coming back as a two, we were like, no, we actually have to be intentional now. Like, we can't just kind of rest on our laurels and just assume that because people love the podcast, they're going to follow us. Like, our audience deserve elevation. You know, people have grown up with us, and everything that we do kind of has to reflect elevation. So that was also like big part of just our new marketing strategy, and we try to take that with us with everything we do now, I think. Yeah.
Tolly, Audrey, thank you so much. It's been so insightful. It's been amazing. Guys, give it up for them. You can listen, you can watch the receipts on Spotify or listen wherever you get podcasts. Guys, thank you for coming, and please give it up for them one more time.
Thanks, everybody.